Welcome to the Speak Like a Leader podcast with John Bates. Welcome to the show. With me today is somebody who has been a real hero of mine for a long time. Like I can almost not remember how far back it was when I saw this guy speak for the first time. And what I do remember is it was, 20 years ago at least. And he stayed with me ever since. And then a few years ago, a friend of mine heard me talking about this guy and said, "Hey, I know that guy. Do you want to meet him?" And I said, "Are you kidding?" Yes. And out of that, we've become friends. So with me today is John Foley. He's the former lead solo pilot of the Blue Angels. And just as an aside, I don't think I talk about this as much anymore, but for my whole growing up, all I wanted to do was be a pilot. And the problem was I wanted to be a World War II fighter pilot, and World War II was over. But I still wanted to be a pilot, and I tried to get I wanted to go to I was trying to get it into the Air Force, and then I wanted to switch over to fly closer ground support for the Marine Corps. But one of my eyes wasn't quite good enough. And so I ran away with my rock band just to prove what a spoiled little brat I was. But so, John does something that I paid lots and lots and lots of attention to. And the Blue Angels growing up, that was about all I ever thought about. And so to get a chance to meet this guy and talk to him was a dream come true. And something that's cool, and it happens more than once on this podcast, is heroes that become friends and still remain heroes. That's awesome. When you get to meet a hero of yours and that guy still or girl still is a friend, that's a big deal. So welcome, John Foley.
Hey, John, thank you so much. And, I'm glad to be here for a lot of reasons. Number one, it's good to see your face again. I do remember when we met. Do
you remember what year that was?
It was about 18, 20 years ago. I think the location was California, and I think it was Pelican Hill or something. There was a big event I was speaking at, and I think you were there. And I still remember your lightsaber because we did some lightsaber stuff afterwards. But most importantly, it's just you being a friend. I'm so proud of what you're doing. I don't know if you remember, but you coached me that day. And you gave me a piece of advice that I still use today every single time when I start a speech, besides saying, glad to be here. I say, my commitment to you is, and you taught me to say those words. My commitment to you is.
Awesome.
So
that's awesome. Well, you're very welcome. And, John, that was so not that it really matters, but I think that was about 5 or 8 years ago that we met, and it was at Terranea.
Oh, Terranea.
And you were speaking and you invited me down. And that was the first time I got to meet you in person. Now, probably 20 years before that, you spoke for a company called Pharmanex, I think.
Okay.
And I came to that event and there were thousands and thousands of people, and everybody got a little bag with your CD at the time. Yeah, got the glad to be here stuff. And I was a fan of yours since then. So when I met you at Terranea, you had been in my life for, a long time. And, that was an awesome moment for me. And to think that I offered you something just makes me even happier. So it's really good. It's really good. Yeah. And,
well, thank you, John. One thing I would like to say too is that you continue to offer not only me, but to your audience so much wisdom, so much knowledge, and so deeply grateful. Even though I've been speaking for 20 years now, a couple decades, probably over 1,000 events now, John, probably 1,500. Hundreds of thousands of people. I learn from you every day, so I'm very grateful. Thank you.
That's awesome. Let's take a little bit of a side road here
Sure.
because of that. Because I didn't think about this coming into it, but you speak a lot and you speak to really big audiences.
Yeah.
So I know that there are a lot of people that are listening and people that I work with who, speak to fairly big audiences, maybe, 100, maybe a couple hundred. Tell us a little bit about that experience and maybe some lessons that you learned as those audiences got bigger and bigger for you, because you speak to thousands and thousands of people at a time. Tell us just a little bit, give us a little insight or maybe some lessons you learned.
Well, absolutely. It started though with an audience of probably 20 people. So, we all got to start somewhere, right? And I remember it because it was up here in Coeur d'Alene. I live in Sun Valley, Idaho, and there was a sales director of the sales person I met skiing, and he goes, well, I'll give you a chance, but I'm not bringing you into the big group yet. You got to prove yourself. So I'll give you to one of my little small divisions. It was 20 people. I rode my Harley to the event. I mean,
right on.
I show up riding my Harley and I jumped in, and it was sales reps and 20 people, and they said, well, we'll see how you do by the results, not by what you say. And that turned out pretty good. That turned into a couple other events that then turned into a national sales meeting. Maybe there was like 600 people there. And then that turned into many other events in the financial services space where there was thousands and thousands of people, like you said. I think my largest audience is 18,000.
Wow.
And it's kind of cool in the green room. You see pictures of Elvis and you see pictures of all these big rock stars, which we're not, right? But it's kind of cool to walk out on stage and feel 18,000 people in the lights. But I will say this, that's not the norm. So let's be very clear. Yeah. The norm is around 400 to 600 people. That seems to be where most organizations, whether it's their leaders or their sales organization, which seems to be where I used to be speaking. Now, of course, it's on Zoom. And it's been that way for 9 months now. And what we found here, a couple things, John, is number one, just how powerful Zoom or any digital, platform can be. And we're finding that we are able to connect to people just like we did in those live events. You're actually able to go a little deeper. It's a little more personal, like you and I are having a conversation here. And at the same time, I think you can get the energy across with the videos and some of the other things we use. So I guess one of the things that I've learned is that it's actually easier with a smaller audience because you're more connected with them. The bigger the audiences get, as you know, you tend to project. You have to feel like you're projecting. You don't feel other than the front few rows, that everybody's hearing you as well. So it takes more energy. I visualize myself projecting, but I still need to be, the same, right? You have to be authentic. Yeah. You can't act like you're projecting. So that's a little bit of a skill. And what I realized was that I don't care how many people are out there. I'm actually going to be the same. I'm going to be coming from the heart. And I'm delivering my message in an authentic way that hopefully resonates with them.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and I love the saying, the art is in hiding the art, because really, if I boiled down what I just heard in what you said, it's that really people just want to have a conversation like you and I are doing right now. They just want to feel like you're talking to them, and it's a lovely, intimate conversation. And if you can manage to bring that feeling to 18,000 people, it's going to be a hit. And the art is in hiding the art, right? You do have to project more, like, open your arms a little wider and really push that energy out a little harder. But if you can still make it feel like it's just them intimately with you, gosh, that's the big win.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. You know it so well. I mean, I think about even the stage setup matters. If when the audience is further back, even if it's just, 100 people or 500 people, whatever, if they're further back, you feel detached, right? So, you get towards the front of the stage, but you can't go over the line so that the light hits you and all that stuff. But the idea there is that, at least what I've learned, is I always start with glad to be here. So I think one of the techniques that I can give is, and you do this so well, is know what you're going to say in the beginning, but then it becomes a flow. I mean, I've visualized it. I do have certain sequences I go through, and I use a lot of video, as you know.
You use it very well too. I recommend people check that out. Yeah.
But it's the flow, right? It's getting in a flow and just being authentic. That's what I found. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, I just want to say for anyone who wants to, on Instagram, you can find great photos from John at Glad to Be Here. And we're going to talk about where that comes from because you've heard that and it's important. And I have said it since the first time I met you, John. Wow. I've been, when people ask me how I am when I'm checking out at the grocery store, I say, I'm glad to be here. How are you? And I've been saying that since I met you that time, way back. And if you want to get a high performance video every week from John, like if you want to stay in this high performance mindset that you're going to get from our conversation from John today, go to johnfoleyinc.com and sign up to get that high performance video every week. And I'm telling you, you'll be glad you did. And if you want to go to LinkedIn and find John, just go to LinkedIn, John Foley. So that's how you can find him. That'll all be in the show notes too. But one of the things that I really, really loved about what you talked about, John, is the Glad to Be Here debrief. And I have the book. And I think people can probably get that book from you at johnfoleyinc.com and stuff. I highly, highly recommend. Not only does it have awesome pictures, but it's got awesome ideas. Now, can I try something out? I'm going to tell you my understanding of this.
Great.
And you correct me. Is that cool?
Perfect. Love it.
Okay. So many things that you said blew my mind, by the way, I'll talk about some of them. But when you talked about the debrief, so the first thing I think about debriefs is that people don't do them enough.
Exactly.
We all talk about what we're going to go do, and we have planning sessions, and then nobody debriefs anything. They're just, So debriefing is one of the things that I think is absolutely key to any endeavor. So the fact that you do a debrief is good. And my short version of the Glad to Be Here debrief, from the story you told about when you were debriefing with the Blue Angels, is that my understanding is that, okay, we sit down after the show and we go around once and everybody calls themselves out on what they could have done better, right? We acknowledge the things we didn't get perfect. Yep. I didn't arm my safety. If I needed to eject, it would have been a bad day. I have highlighted that on my checklist. You can count on me to do that from now on, and I'm glad to be here.
Yes.
Right? And everybody ends with, I'm glad to be here, because you guys are present to the fact that it would be easy not to be here, but for the grace of God, so glad to be here. So everybody goes around once and calls themselves out. Then, if I understand it right, you go around a second time, and if John Bates didn't admit he did something wrong, John Foley's going to call him out, and you don't want to be that guy. So you call yourself out on the first time around, and hopefully there's not much going on in the second time around, right? Yeah. And then you make sure that you're all clear on what you're going to do to solve the issues. And if I understand it correctly, that's about 20% of the allotted debrief time.
Yes. Then we go. Go ahead.
Then, with the 80% of the debrief time that's left, you watch the game tapes and you celebrate and you high five each other and you congratulate each other and you call out what you did right, because you get more of what you focus on. You have to acknowledge the things and correct them, but you also need to spend time celebrating, because that's what you want more of. Now, did I get that essentially correct?
Yeah, yeah, really good. You must have been listening pretty well
I was.
during that talk. There are some nuances that I want to get out with the crowd.
Yeah.
The first one is that the debrief book that you have, you can't get that on Amazon. It's not public. It's part of one of my trainings, right? But if you go to the website, johnfoleyinc.com, yeah, that's the only place you can get it, and it's pretty powerful because
it's fabulous. Go get it and implement it with your team.
Yeah,
no questions.
Let's talk about that because I think you're right. It's the biggest tool that I can give to any organization, and it's least done. It's kind of ironic when the thing that's least done in mostly the corporate world, business world, right, but even in our personal lives, and yet is the most powerful if you buy into the power, right? So the first thing that happens is people say, well, we don't have time. Just like you were saying, we're running and gunning. Go ahead. What did you say there?
Breaking belief barriers, right? We got to get the belief that the debrief is going to make a difference.
Look, you got all my stuff there. This is awesome. But
and I've got my signed yellow Blue Angels helmet signed by John Foley. That's right.
Yeah, with the gold visor. That's yeah. There you go. That's a Blue Angel replica helmet. Awesome. Wow. Yeah, so let's dive into the debrief real quick because there are some subtleties that I think could really help everybody here. All right. So the first thing is you have to believe in the power, and actually by taking the time, you actually will generate more time because you learn from not only your mistakes, but you celebrate your victories, which is really powerful because you're reinforcing the good things. So it actually is a leadership tool. And that's one thing that I want people understand. You're not doing an after action review necessarily or win-loss review. That's out there in the world a lot. Okay. And what do those typically focus on is what went wrong. Okay. What I like to preach in the Glad to Be Here debrief is, yes, we do that. You're going to discuss what went well, what we could do better, but that's not what's critical. What's critical is building what I call this Glad to Be Here spirit, this esprit de corps, this foundational feeling, and being present and focused is the most important thing. So Glad to Be Here is the essence of the debrief. And we can talk about some of the structure of the debrief here in a second. But the key on Glad to Be Here, and you said, sometimes you're right. You were just glad to be alive. I mean, no kidding. There were some of those days where you're not sure, right? In that moment, I'll tell you, I've had 3 distinct ones where it feels like there's cold piss in your vein when you're not sure if you're going to live or die. I mean, it's not the kind of feeling you want, by the way. Okay. But it's just like all of a sudden it's like, whoa. And, I don't know. That's the only way I can describe it. And then within the next second, you're either alive or you're dead. So if you're alive, you kind of go, wow, I don't want to repeat that again. So you better learn from it, right? And that's one of the keys on this debrief. But that's not why you do it. You see, what I've learned is that, those are the one-off situations. What you really want to do is celebrate your victories. What you really want to do is reinforce what's going well in an organization, what's reinforced going well in a team. And if you actually make the debrief part of the DNA of your organization, part of what I would call a culture of execution, which has a brief, execute, and debrief. And you need those 3 elements, okay? It's not enough just to do the debrief. Most people spend a lot of time in preparation and planning. Then we go out there and we execute it. And then what? You just go off to the next thing. And you've lost a huge opportunity to learn, to grow, but also to reinforce and be a leader to your teammates. And everybody becomes a leader in that room because we level the playing field. That's one of the core dynamics that we have to do. So I'll take a pause and then I'll go into some of the structure of it too.
Well, so I mean, I love that. So there's, first of all, the glad to be here mentality. I tell people that I work with, I remind them that you are always giving your life to something. But we don't relate to it like that, right? But just look at where you spend your money and your time, and that's what you're giving your life to. And here's the thing. If what you're giving your life to right now isn't worth giving your life to, do something else so that anytime, at any moment, you can say, I'm glad to be here and really mean it, Get how precious life is. I just lost Flash and it's been right in my face. And make darn sure that you don't do something that's not worth giving your life to for very long, because you're giving your life to that thing, man. you know?
Yeah.
And I love where you're going now, because I think this is one of the other things that corporations, okay, so first of all, you're absolutely hugely correct. All this preparation planning, all this time executing, and then we blow off the most important part, which is actually the least amount of time, which is the debrief. And leveling the playing field, right? When you guys did this debrief, yes, when you're flying around, there's a boss, right? But when you're doing the debrief, it's level playing field.
Yeah. So let's dive into that. First off, I love the idea of your life force. Where do we give our energy to? And like even now, spending this time together, and why? Because hopefully we're impacting other people out there that are listening, right? That's the key. Can you share things, our experiences, in a way that's beneficial to others? Wisdom, right? We all have it, right? And so that to me is the most important part. Do you have a purpose, and a purpose larger than self? And that's what we did on the Blue Angels. We called ourselves ambassadors of goodwill. It's still what I like to do now. I like to call myself an angel, because I just want to go out there and be a messenger and give guidance and protect, and to actually inspire others, to reach their goals. So glad to be here. While it is, sometimes life or death, it's really more about the nuances of celebrating the small things in life. Every morning when I wake up, the first thing I start with is a gratitude practice. And to me, that's what glad to be here is. It's gratitude. So today, first thing, I'm home. I'm in Sun Valley. By the way, it's supposed to snow 2 feet tomorrow, so I can't wait. But today I was, waking up, and I just finished a seminar that I gave to about 300 leaders in San Diego. And so, I'm just just grateful that we were able to do that, and I had Bruce Bowen in. I don't know if you remember him. He was probably the best defensive player in the NBA, won 3 NBA championships with the Spurs and all that. But so I brought him in, and we could do some cool things. But the key there was I just woke up saying, wow, I have some opportunity today to impact other people's lives. But then I went, wait a minute, I'm also healthy. I feel good. I'm here with my family, so I can say hi to my wife as compared to being on the road like you and I used to be so much, right? And then you came up, your thought. I said, well, I can't wait. John popped in my head. I said, I can't wait till we can have this discussion and hopefully impact other people's lives. So I actually have a very defined habit of the way I wake up, and a gratitude practice is part of that. All right, and that to me is the essence of getting this glad to be here ethos throughout an organization, or even throughout your own life. Right now, back to the debrief, because that is where it comes in. Okay. I'm constantly, and when I go to bed too, I'm doing a debrief. But when we get to the dynamics, there's actually 5 dynamics that I believe you need to have in a glad to be here debrief. Okay. And the first dynamic is you need a safe environment. Okay. And that comes from respect. So when I talk about a safe environment, we're all pretty aware of what's going on with the pandemic and physical safety. But when I talk about this to organizations, I talk about psychological safety. Is it safe in your team? Is it safe in your division? Is it safe in your, company to speak out if you need to also reinforce and to support others, right? So the first dynamic is you need to create that environment. That's when I said we leveled the playing field. Is of course we know who the CEO is, and of course we know on the Blue Angels who the lead solo pilot is, or the operations officer. But it's all of us as a team coming together, and respect, though, is the key. You can't lose the respect. So that's the first dynamic, right? Now, the next dynamic is it overcomes one of the biggest challenges we have, which gets in the way of having a good debrief, and that's egos. Okay. So
welcome to humanity.
Yeah. No kidding. We all have egos, right? You think fighter pilots have big egos? Are you right? Do you think business leaders have big egos? So we had a saying, check your ego at the door. That was dynamic number 2. Check your ego at the door. See, it's about the we, not the I. So therefore, I don't care who's right. I don't care who's wrong. What I do care about is us getting better together. All right. That's the key and that's where the humility comes in. So when I'm hiring and looking for people, I'm looking for humility, not just that they're good at something. That's easy. Okay. I want someone who's good and humble. That's hard.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's That's something else.
So now that's the 2 dynamics. We'll go to dynamic 3, okay? The dynamic 3 is we better have a safe environment, what I call lay it on the table, okay? So 3 is lay it on the table. That's an open and honest environment. So we have to agree that we're not going to have withholds. We're not going to hold things back. We're going to be open and honest, and we're going to lay things on the table. And, be honest with us, very few of us really do this in our lives, let alone at work. We withhold things, right? So go ahead.
John, one of the biggest breakthroughs I've ever had in my life was when I created myself as the drill instructor for your greatness.
Tell me more about that.
In my original experience as being a coach, I was being all mamby-pamby because I wanted people to like me.
Oh.
And so I wouldn't say the hard stuff. And I made it mean way too much anyway. Like it's just a correction that you could make and you'd be better. Like that's all it was. But I made it mean something and I didn't want to say it. And I wanted them to like me. And what I realized is nobody was succeeding in anything. And they actually, they thought I was all right, but they didn't really like me that much anyway.
Right.
And it dawned on me that, look, a drill instructor, if they don't say it now, if they step over something, you die out there on the battlefield. Yeah. I'm not going to do that, right? I'm not going to step over something and leave you missing something you need. So I decided that in all of my interactions like that, where I'm coaching and I'm, making people better and things, I'm the drill instructor for your greatness. Right. And that allows me to, and when people coach with me, I say, now, do I have your permission to coach you? And they say, sir, yes, sir. And then I've got it. Right. And so as the drill instructor for your greatness, I can say anything and it doesn't mean anything. I'm just giving you stuff that works. Yeah. Right. But I think that there is in the corporate dynamic and in that egos left unchecked at the door and not leveling the playing field, it's very, very hard for people to just speak the truth. But that's the only thing that actually works.
Right. Well, and also I think your intent matters, right? Like you were saying.
Absolutely.
The intent is not to hurt someone or bring someone down. Your intent is just the opposite. And sometimes, to bring them up. And sometimes we have blind spots. Someone needs to point out our blind spot. But something that you mentioned early on in the debrief that I like to talk about is that you first identify your own self-comings first. So you look inward before outward. And that's why when you were describing, which is exactly right, we called it the general safe. When we started this meeting, and there's still 2 more of the 5 dynamics I'm going to give you in a second, all right? But when we started the meeting, it was a sacred environment. So everybody treated it that way. When the boss was ready or the leader, whoever, they would just say, debrief. And then we would go around the table. And it started with the boss on the Blue Angels. The boss would go first, and then we just go around the table, and then we go around outside the table because we had all our support officers. There's usually 16 people in the room at any one time. And everybody first got a chance to say just 2 things. Generally, how did I feel about the event? Because I wanted to know the feelings. Did you feel it went well? Did it not go well? Let's just get that out on the table first. Now there's other teachings out there that say, oh no, we only talk about facts. Well, I don't agree with that. I think facts are important, but I think you got to start with the feeling first. Because what you're doing is you're being open. You're saying, here's what I feel. You're not saying this is what happened, but this is what I feel, right? Then you go into here's what happened, right? Okay. So, but before you do that, you always, after the feeling, so I could say, boss, I'm glad we went flying today. But I had 2 safeties, and a safety means something out of parameters. So if there was something that happened during the air show, and it doesn't have to be flying, it could be walking to the crowd. I didn't acknowledge a little girl over there like I should have. I walked away or something. The point is that you want to acknowledge that first in front of your teammates that, hey, I was out of parameters, because we don't do that. That's not our behaviors, right? And the same thing with, maybe you're out of position in a maneuver. Let's bring it up first, get it on the table, and then let's move on, right? So the safeties, hopefully you don't have any, right? The idea is, okay, everything was in parameters. Here's the important point is, as an organization, you have to know what those parameters are, because people need to know where am I outside of parameters? And accountability is critical there. And that, by the way, is the fourth dynamic, which I call, instead of accountability, I call it own it and fix it. Own it and fix it mentality. So you're not only accountable, here's what's more important. You're personally responsible. And when you can get that personal responsibility in every single part of the organization, then accountability becomes a given. You never even need to talk about it. And that's that ownership mentality. So then the fifth and final dynamic, which is the most important, and we mentioned it earlier, is glad to be here. And to me, that's that appreciation, that gratitude. And we were appreciation that we were just part of that organization, started with, hey, I'm very fortunate to be here. Thank you. Also, I appreciate each and every one of my team members. I appreciate the impact that we're able to make on people's lives. I just appreciate the opportunities in my life. Glad to be here takes on such a big a theme. It's more than gratitude. It's really about life.
Yeah. Oh, it's so great. I mean, and I'm telling you, I've been saying that for, so long, I can't even remember. And been so grateful for that concept, all the other stuff too, but that thing's come with me everywhere. And I don't know where my stickers are right now, but I have some of those stickers. So, and I love them. They're on a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
just like what you mean by stickers, like I'm holding my phone up. I know people can't see this, but I've got this hashtag glad to be here sticker on my phone. People, you can get them on the website or just go to hashtag. If you tweet hashtag glad to be here, we're out there. So it's cool.
Yeah, it's really good. It's good. And it's such a great reminder. So now, so I love that. That's the glad to be here debrief. You can get that at John's website. It's brilliant. And I just want to echo again, all that work goes into the planning. All that work goes into doing it. A debrief isn't even all that much time. And that's where all the value comes together, in my opinion, of all the rest of it. So it's just such an important thing. And I think it's underutilized, as you said. So,
here's the good news before you go next time is because the last 2 decades I've been out there really showing that is that we now have that in healthcare now. There's a lot more of debriefs being done that are more of the glad to be here type. So we're actually saving lives. And it's also important in business is people are embracing this concept because they realize it makes sense. Now, how do we actually actualize it? It is the quickest way. By the way, to reinvent yourself because you find out, things that you maybe need to do differently. At the same time, it reinforces the good thing. And the last thing I'd like to say about it that's so critical is it's a chemistry builder. It's a camaraderie builder. Right now, we need connection, right? And it's a way to help connect to each other.
So fabulous. And, John, that's the thing that really intrigues me about your whole experience because it's not like you just flew with the Blue Angels. And that's certainly precision at a level that is just almost unimaginable. And there, something goes wrong. It's a really bad day there. You've also been in other situations. One of the reasons I love talking to my veteran friends is because they know how to do something like their life depends on it. And I don't know many other people in society anymore who do, that's a really huge thing. And we were talking about my friend who is going to the Middle East to take over a really important command. And you mentioned that you were in the Straits of Hormuz years ago, and there was maybe some difficult stuff going on. I'd love to hear your stories about that and anything that we could learn from that experience because, doing things in that kind of a circumstance. I mean, that's why I think the military is so great to model because, man, it's got to work. It's about results,
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So just so everyone's context, I actually went to Naval Academy, then started flying jets off aircraft carriers and happened to be on the Enterprise since 1986 through 1988. And back then, we were, if you remember, we reflagged Kuwaiti tankers. Iran was the threat. Iraq supposedly was our friends, and they were mining the Straits of Hormuz. I mean, that was the issue. So we were there to protect the ships and make sure that they could get through safely. And I remember that I would launch off the carrier, would fly some escort over the ships, and you turn on your radar, and man, there'd be hundreds of ships waiting at the mouth because no one would go through, but they would try to tag on to our convoys, the Kuwaiti tankers, and they would tag on because they felt safe. So we were there, really trying to make commerce happen and be safe. And Iran was, at that point, they were dropping mines. And so that was, against the rules. I mean, the whole internationally, it's kind of like you don't do that, right? And in international waters. But you had to catch them doing it because you couldn't. Rules of engagement was we had to see them. So we were out there looking for them. And finally, we did find that they were doing that. And so we were able to launch a strike against the Sahan and Sabahan, which were two Iranian frigates and destroyers that we ended up sinking. And the SEALs, took the oil platforms and all that kind of stuff. But the point is that it only lasted about 18 hours. And then, it stopped because Iran said, okay, we understand. And that stopped that day. So we were able to quickly change the situation. But I guess the lesson is that, be prepared. I mean, if I think about the amount of preparation that went into the training of every single person on that carrier, there's only about 100 pilots on an aircraft carrier, but there's over 5,000 people. Okay. And then there's the air wing, and everybody has to work together as a team. Every element comes together. Can you get off the ship safely on a catapult going from 0 to 200 miles per hour in 1.8 seconds? Can you come back and land? Slap a 22-ton jet on the pitching deck of an aircraft carrier at night going about 150 miles per hour where the seas are moving, the deck's pitching. If you're perfect, even if the deck's not moving, you miss the ramp by 11.2 feet. And sometimes the deck's moving 30 feet, so it takes... it takes teamwork and it takes focus and concentration. So I guess the biggest lesson was that how important teams are, how important each and every individual is. And again, to have that purpose of something higher than self.
Well, the other thing I hear in that is when we're bringing it back to communication and speaking and public speaking and things like that is, look at, like, when something's really serious, look at all the training that went into that 18 hours, right? Like, I mean, it was years of training to prepare for that 18 hours of thousands and thousands of people. Okay, well, is what you're doing not important? Exactly. And Steve Jobs would practice for an hour for every minute he was going to be on stage giving that talk. And yet so many leaders and so many speakers, they just wing it, and then they wonder why Steve Jobs is so much better than they are. Okay, if you practice your talk for 45 hours for a 45-minute talk, you'd be pretty darn good, But I think that's why we say people have natural talent. It's to get at it doing the work. Yeah. There's no such thing as natural talent. It's all earned talent. We get, like, look at us. We're globs when we get born. Like, the natural leader. Sorry, he's, going in his diapers right now. So there's no such thing in my book. It's all earned. And that's a big piece of the takeaway, I think, from that, like you said. The other thing that I love, John, and I don't know if you'll remember this story. I'm sure you probably will. But when I saw you speak so many years ago, you closed it out with that story about how you were asked to go make sure that this jet was in good shape, right? Go stretch its legs.
Yes.
Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, happy to. Wow. So that was a while ago. So I was on the Blue Angels, and I was actually on my third year, and I'm going to go leave the Blues and go on to another fleet squadron in a leadership role. And happened being on my day off, it was a Monday. We work 6 days a week and work on the weekends. And one of the problems, one of the other jets had an engine problem. So I was the test pilot, and you got to have thousands of hours to not only fly an airplane, but to become a test pilot at it. And basically, when you have a maintenance issue, in this case, the engine needed to be replaced. So, you go down there and go down maintenance control, and you get to talk to your jet mechanics. And I remember Sue, and, we talk one-on-one, what'd you do? How's it look? And they tell you, and they say, sir, the jet's ready to go. And then you walk out there and you trust them, right? So I climb in the jet and take it airborne. And when you're doing test hops, it depends on what the test hop is for. In this case, an engine change, you actually get to shut the engines down airborne. You put it in a precarious spot and then hope it relights again. You have relight procedures, and you just got to go through and test them, right? And so I did all that, and the airplane, it was fine. It responded perfectly. So I land the jet. I go walking in, my boss first thanked the maintenance troops, and then I said, "Hey boss, airplane's ready to go. It's met the specs, the highest specs the Navy has." And then he said, "Yeah, but Gucci, I don't have confidence in this airplane. So I want you to take it out again. And this time, ring it out." Now, that's what he said. Ring it out.
Dude, you don't tell a fighter pilot to ring it out unless you mean it.
No, you do. That's the type of orders you want, but you never get them. You never get that. You always have a set plan or a set process. So I'm walking out to the jet that day, and it's this beautiful sunny day in Pensacola, right? The sun's out. It's just beautiful. I've got my jet waiting for me, my crew's there. And I'm thinking, wow, I've got orders to ring it out, which is basically says, let's take this jet to the limit, right?
Yeah.
What limit do I want to push today? And I'm starting thinking to myself as I'm walking out to the jet, because, as the lead solo pilot, you pour more G's than any fighter pilot ever. Okay. In 1 year, I pulled probably as many G's as a whole career of a normal fighter pilot, because you're just wrapping the jet up, flying upside down, doing negative G's. One day I did 20 loops in a row just to see if I get myself sick. I mean, I was having fun, right? And so I'd done a lot of stuff at that point, and I'm going, well, what haven't I done? And as I'm walking out to the jet, a thought hits my head. How high? How high can this airplane really go? Because, well, first off, I didn't know. And second off, in the test pilot manual for, altitude on an F-18, they got a graph. It said 50,000 plus. That's what it said in the graph, 50,000 plus. So I'm sitting there going, I wonder what the plus sign means.
Pluses, yeah.
You don't get these chances often in your life, right? And I said, man, when you get it, seize it, right? So what you have to do is, I asked for an unrestricted climb, and you actually do what they call a Rotowski climb, is you got to get supersonic. Now, fortunately, Pensacola's over the water, or near the water, so I get over the water, I get supersonic, and then you do a Rotowski climb, which is a parabola. You don't just point the nose straight up. So I'm supersonic, going through 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 55, 56, 57. All of a sudden, you start to see the curvature of the earth. And I gotta tell you, John, when you get to see that, like, I love your background here of an astronaut, in space. I mean, I wasn't up that high. I just had the rare privilege of interviewing Chris Cassidy, who's, the astronaut who just came back, right?
Dude, Chris Cassidy is a good personal friend of mine.
Isn't he amazing? He was on our podcast.
I love Chris Cassidy. Yeah. That guy. Oh my gosh.
Right. And then you got Ron Gagarin, right? He's part of the EPS group, right? In fact, we just did our podcast last week with Ron called the High Performance Zone. And by the way, this podcast is great. If you guys want to, another cool podcast, jump on, iTunes, the High Performance Zone. But you'll hear it. Ron and I, or Chris and I, are talking, and, they've been out in space, but I've only hit that kind of, it's still in the atmosphere, but you start to see the curvature of the earth. And I'll tell you, it blows your mind. I can only imagine what it feels like to look back on the entire earth, because you realize just how precious life is, how thin that veil. All of a sudden it was getting darker. You could, it wasn't black yet, but you could feel it. This is a sunny day, and you could feel it. And now the jet is about to depart, because my jet's not made to go up there. Okay. The engines need oxygen. That's what burns. The fuel burns with oxygen, and the oxygen starts to get less. So the airplane is starting to shut down. The engines are winding down. down. And I'm like, man, I got to get out of there. So I tip the nose over and I get it to drop, which is kind of cool because I remember the movie, The Right Stuff. Do you ever see that movie? Right Stuff? You remember Chuck Yeager? So in that movie, Chuck Yeager is testing an airplane and he does exactly what I did, but he departs. He gets up there and the airplane stops flying and he gets in a spin and has to eject. And I'm going, man, that's not the ending I want today. So I push it over, the nose comes down. So now I'm cool because now I can get some more airspeed and now I bullseye it. So I know how high I can go. The next thought is how fast can this jet go? Well,
down.
Yeah, straight down. So space shuttle comes down at an angle, right? I pointed the nose straight down. I mean, I had both hands on the stick. I'm in full afterburner. I'm using all the potential energy I can get out of gravity. And I'm screaming now, Mach 1.2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, I'm just screaming out of the atmosphere. And the Earth's getting a little bit bigger. All of a sudden, I start to get pushed forward in my straps. Okay, because I'm strapped in, right? And I can feel the pressure pushing me forward. And I'm going, that's weird because something's pushing me back. And I'm a dart coming out of the atmosphere. Can you guess what it is? What do you think's pushing the airplane back?
Dude, I have no idea.
It's humidity. It's just rain. I mean, just the water in the air, even when it's not raining, that's strong enough to push an airplane back. Okay, physics. It's just natural physics, but it blows your mind. So anyhow,
so like you basically went from such rarefied atmosphere that when you hit thicker atmosphere, you felt the slowdown. Holy
it actually slowed me down, and
oh my gosh,
yeah, that blew my mind too. And then of course I took my hand and touched the glare shield. It's hot, because the heat of all this
re-entry.
Not completely, but a little bit. And so then I get low fuel light. I'd actually burned 10,000 pounds of fuel in about 10 minutes, which is kind of fun. And then I landed the jet, and I'll never forget this. My crew chief looks at me and he goes, "Sir, what did you do?" And then I'm thinking, man, I'm in trouble, and then I realize he's actually not looking at me. He's looking through me. So I turn around, I look at the jet, the paint is gone. Yeah, John, I melted the paint off the jet. All right. The leading edges were bare metal. I mean, from the heat, right? Hunks of paint are gone. And I went, Joe, just went up to 57,000 feet, went, Mach, over 1,000 miles per hour. He goes, cool. And then he looked at me, and this is when that spirit really connects. He looked at me, looked me in the eye, and he said, "Don't worry, sir, I'll fix it for you." And then he said, "Glad to be here." Right?
Oh,
yeah. And that was a very special moment, because in our eyes, what I heard him say is, "Hey, I got you back. I got you covered." And I'm grateful to be part of an organization where you can push the limits, right? And it was really cool. By the way, they took the airplane in the hangar and they repainted it the whole night. So nice to have teammates like that.
Oh man, dude. I mean, it's all right there. That's such a beautiful, wonderful, fabulous story. I love that story. So I forgot what I was going to ask. There was something else there is another component that I think has got to be a part of the Blue Angels. I haven't heard you talk about it, but I know that when I worked with the astronauts, one of the really great stories I heard is that the final test, to make it short, the final test to become an astronaut is fundamentally, are you likable? You go in for a final interview after you pass all those other tests, and you talk with the astronauts that are already astronauts for about an hour, and then you leave, and they all talk about whether or not they like you. And even more important than do they like you, do they think you are likable? Because you're going to be on the space station with them. You're going to be up there representing the US with all kinds of people from other countries. And you can pass all the other tests, right? You can have the skills, but if you're not likable, like you said, if you're not humble, it's not happening. And I think that that's such an important lesson for entrepreneurs and people that are hiring for large corporations and small companies, like, that whole likability thing and the cooperative nature of human beings. I just read a book. I think you'd love it, John. It's called Survival of the Friendliest.
Oh, nice.
Because Have you heard of that?
No, I love the title. Yeah.
Oh, dude, it's so good. And fundamentally, what happened somewhere in the upper Paleolithic, we were on Earth with a whole bunch of other human type. Like there were Denisovans and there were Neanderthals. In fact, I have some Neanderthal in me. I probably shouldn't brag about that, but anyway. But there were a number of different human species, and then all of a sudden, Homo sapien just went wild and everything else died out. And when people talk about evolution, one of the things they say is survival of the fittest, right? And these evolutionary biologists think that that's one of the biggest tragedies that got foisted on us by that, is that everybody pictures the biggest, strongest, meanest thing will survive. But that's exactly not what happened. It's that we got friendlier to each other. We got better at cooperating and just freaking completely took over the planet. And I think that we forget that, or didn't even know that is our superpower. It's not I'm the biggest, strongest. It's not I can beat you up. It's not I can compete with you better. It's we can cooperate. That is our superpower. And I think that's what the Blue Angels proves. That's what, all of your experiences throughout your career prove. It's about cooperation. That's really what we're good at.
Yeah, I love that story. I think about another word with cooperation is collaboration, right? So, same thing, right? This idea of cooperate and collaborate. And I love the likability. That's actually the test we had on the Blue Angels too. I'm giving a seminar on hiring practices here next week. And one of the things that we're talking about is, how do you hire right? Right. And part of it is in the Blue Angel system is, we had the standard things like you do in most corporate world is, you get an application, letters of referral and all that. You needed 3 letters from your commanding officer and some others, but that only got you in the door. That's not how we selected you, and just like the astronauts, when you're selecting someone for that kind of role, you take your time. All right. So the process would take almost a year, to be honest with you, from the application. But we finally get into the final interviews and you weed out people. And when you get into the interview process, it's a lot like in the corporate world, except maybe this is, I remember walking into my final interview and we selected 2 people for every spot. We call them finalists. So let's say there's 3 pilots that needed to be picked that year. And we did, we would always rotate out 3 of the 6 pilots every year. So you can imagine that not only reaching level excellence, but sustaining it with different people under changing conditions. Yep. So you better have a culture that makes that work. But I walk in the room and it's a formal interview at this point, right? We had done a lot of the informal stuff and gone to dinner and all this. And it's a final formal interview. And it's pretty impressive. You're in the Blue Angel debriefing room. I mean, it's wall panels, pictures of history and these beautiful leather chairs. And you just feel the presence, right? And you're at the end of the table all by yourself. And everyone else is looking at you, right? And the whole officer corps is there, 16, 17 people, right? And then they go through an interview. And at the end of after that interview is over, the team, and it takes time, we talk about it, right? And again, it really boils down to, do you like that person? Are they qualified is not a question. You know that right up the bat, right? But it's really who's got the right chemistry, who's going to fit in the right role. And there are different roles amongst the team. So you definitely, and it is a likability in a way this though. I don't necessarily have to like the person. It's better if I do, but are we going to pick the right person? Okay, for the right role. And we had what we called a no way. And that was that any one of the 17 officers, if they had a feeling that they would not be able to fly with that person or work with that person, they could say no way. And that was it. There was no questions asked. That person is not joining the team. Now you have to be very careful to use that card because you're dealing with someone's, dreams and hopes and dreams. But the point is that we had that because at the end of the day, we could have a debate and it may not be, 100% in the discussion. Some people would say, hey, I think this person would be a better fit. This person would be a better fit. But once we pick on the person, it's 100% to the outside world. Meaning when you go outside that door, It was 100%. This is who we pick. And likability was a big factor. I call it chemistry more than likability.
Yeah.
Chemistry matters.
Yeah. That's cool. So now I know you got to jump. I didn't yet get to ask you about one of your painful failures and what you learned.
I got tons.
Does anything come to mind, like a quick one for us?
Oh, yeah, super quick. So, I mean, one time I almost died on the back of the end of a carrier. I'm landing late at night, and it's actually a really nice night. The moon's out, and I'm coming in thinking everything's looking great. I hear a blood-curdling scream. I realize I'd gotten distracted. I wasn't watching the meatball, which is in Top Gun, the landing signal, and it gone from a center ball, which is good, to a red flashing ball, which is really bad, meaning you're going to die. And, full power, boom, didn't crash, but landed on the carrier 18 inches from dying that day. Talk about a debrief, right? It was different. I remember the landing signal officers, they came in and they basically looked at me. And first off, I'm just glad to be alive, right? So I'm still breathing hard. And they kind of smiled and they said, do you know what you did wrong? And I was like, yeah. And I told them exactly what I did wrong. Gotten under power, but really what I'd done is I'd gotten distracted, okay? And I'd gotten overconfident. And this brought me back to, hey, you've got to be on your A game every single day. And I told them exactly what I felt was wrong. And they said, yeah, that's right. Don't do it again. And I'm not kidding you. Don't do it again I never went low again. I mean, I said, I'm either going to be on or above. I'm not going low. So you can really learn from those. Now that was a massive, failure, but I can tell you that I have them every day. All right. I have little things that don't go well. And I debrief it and I say, you know what? I'm not going to do that again, or I'm going to do something different. So failure is your biggest your teacher. I'm learning every day, and I'll leave you with my mantra now. Besides, glad to be here. It's to give, learn, and grow. So I say, give, learn, grow. First it used to be live, grow, give, and then I went, wait a minute. The source of all power is in giving. Right? If I can give, like this whole podcast right now, just giving our knowledge to somebody, that's the first thing. And then can I learn from something, from somebody else or somebody? And then the most important part, if you do learn, is you grow. And I'm trying to grow every single day. So thank you.
You're super welcome. Well, so listen, John Foley, I'm glad to be here. And you know what else? I'm glad you're here too. Thank you so much. It really is like if you'd have told me as I walked out from your performance so many years ago that I would be talking to you like this on my podcast and feel like I can legitimately call you a friend, I would have been thrilled to know it. So we'll put all this stuff in the show notes. I really hope right now I'm going to ask you in front of everybody, please, will you come back sometime?
Absolutely.
And do some more with us, because you're such a gift. You're such a contribution. And I really appreciate that you are taking all that stuff. Because I mean, look, it cost me a lot to train you. I hope you know that, right? So thank you very much.
Thank you, my brother.
for paying it forward for all of us taxpayers, right?
Well, I so appreciate you. And, John, we are friends, but I really appreciate what you're doing for all of your clients, for all the people that you're able to support, because you're the real deal. You're making a big difference. And just glad to know you, brother. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Speak Like a Leader podcast. Go be awesome.